My name is Sam, and I am here as a member of Sustainable Amersham. And we are a community group who are focused, as the name suggests, on encouraging Amersham and its residents to adopt a more sustainable lifestyle. And we currently have about 75 members and over 500 followers on social media. And we are particularly focused, well, we're interested in all sorts of things, but we're particularly focused on 3 projects at the moment. One of which is to encourage Amersham to become a plastic-free town. Another is a group that we call Learn and Act, which is all about collating and disseminating information about how to change your lifestyle in all its various factors, a more sustainable one. And the final group is the GreenEnergy group, which is the most recently formed group. And we are always looking for new members, so please sign up and come and join us. And we are and we have an aim this year to offer 6 events and talks. We are looking to talk about heat pumps, electric vehicles potentially, and our next event, which will be in late June, is about saving energy in the home. I'm sure we will all agree is a very pertinent topic that's raced up the national agenda. And as part of that, we're going to be running a survey. An online survey. We're going to try and find out how the people of Amersham are doing with their energy saving and how much they're using and where they would like some help, and see if we can get involved in supporting strategies for energy saving. So that's for the future, but for the here and now, one of the topics that people were particularly interested in was solar panels. And by solar panels, I mean solar photovoltaic panels. So these are essentially big slabs of semiconductor, beautifully constructed, to create electricity when light falls on them. And recent stats I've just got, so by the end of last year, there were, out of 29 million households in the UK, there are now 1 million of them that have solar panels on them. And they are capable, therefore, of generating up to 3 gigawatts of electricity. And that is equivalent, or nearly equivalent, will be probably by the middle of this year, to the electricity output of the new Sizewell C nuclear power reactor. So, there's more of it around than I had thought. The Energy Saving Trust has just updated their sort of views of the average energy usage to do with solar electricity, and they estimate that a typical installation in this country is a 4.2 kilowatt panel setup. They suggest that costs about £6,500, and if you get the smart energy
meter? Smart meter?
No, it's when the energy companies give you some money for exporting your electricity, the guarantee. Then you will smart energy. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I? Sorry. I'll just backtrack on the...
We don't have a mic, do we?
No, the mic is for the camera. Not for the okay.
Sorry.
Christoph has a... I'll just finish very quickly, so we can get to the microphone bit. I can come back to those numbers later, actually. Let's get on to Christoph. So, those are general average statistics, but they hide a multitude of variation and potential issues. So we thought it would be better to speak to someone who's done it recently, who's got some real detail about their installation. So we're very lucky today to have Christoph Geppert, who is a resident of Old Amersham. He's a sustainability consultant, and he's very kindly agreed to speak to us about his installation, his recent installation, and he is very happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you, Christoph.
This is our house, and it is before the solar panels come in, so they're not invisible, but I wanted to have the effect of before and after. Why me? Why do I talk about it? And I think Sam already has taken some of that away. At the beginning, I have a background in management economics and politics and industrial design. And I have worked in design in many different areas, like anything from a name to a logo to packaging to an electric motorbike, aircraft interiors, but also architecture. Madeline, my wife, who is somewhere in the back, and I together have a sustainability consultancy company, which we started 4 years ago as a kind of sidearm of our design company. But I am a neighbor, and I am in possession of a solar installation now, which I'm very proud of, very happy with. But it wasn't totally clear run, absolutely easy. I think one interesting question for me is it worth it? And for us, it was an easy question because we just wanted to contribute green energy to the planet. And so whatever it costs is necessary. So that was our basic question. Does it pay ultimately? Yes, but it can be, you need to have a bit of long breath because it can be 7 years, it can be 10 years, it can be 20 years. Luckily, the installations have a lifespan of 25 years, so it should definitely cover it. But it's not something which will create return instantly. Do we really have to do something? And I think I always like the idea of looking back and when people started to talk about sustainability. And the reason why I think it is really important that everybody who can afford to do it should do it now. In the 60s, the American government already had a prognosis of where the emissions will go due to the use of fossil fuels. And if you look at the red and the green lines, there were the predictions. And the blue is the red is the actual numbers, and the blue and the green were the predictions. So the current emission levels have been known to come since the 60s, and we have chosen not to do anything. So I think it's high time. And one of the slightly entertaining or sad graphics which show that is this. We're all still busy with COVID. We see it as a massive impact on our life. The assumption is that it's nothing in comparison to what's coming with the recession. And the next step is climate change after that will be a huge, huge impact, way, way bigger than what we can imagine. And then after that, if we don't deal with it, loss of biodiversity is the next one. And there is a huge possibility that we don't have the capacity to imagine the impact of that. So I think it's hopefully more motivational than frightening. But it's just a really, really important element to look at. And so I think everybody have a go. As a general number, a UK home could create between 1.3 and 1.6 tons of carbon emission savings. Given that the average carbon footprint of an individual is 12 tons, that's a number which is higher than usual because it includes the imports, which the government normally doesn't include when it talks about footprints. So I think normally the UK is quoted at 8 tons per capita. But if you take all the products which are manufactured for the UK in other countries, then it goes up to 12. So you're not solving the problem, but everyone who has the panels on the roof has a chance of installing a significant contribution. And what Sam said earlier, an average, that's regarding an average installation. The solar panels are, I mean, as we can imagine, the UK is not the sunniest place, so it's not the biggest contributor. Wind energy will always have a bigger impact, but wind turbines are not easily installed on a domestic setting. So therefore the solar is a easier contribution, but it isn't as impactful as wind. But for now, I think it is the most accessible one we can have. So what's the situation with planning permission, permitted development, building control, DNO? All these things come to you if you want to start to look at it. The good news is it is permitted development. And this is a page from the planning portal. If you need links to that, I can send them through later. You can look at the video. So basically, you're allowed to put solar panels up. You don't need permission, but it is a cautious element depending on how you stand with your neighbors, how difficult the situation is, how critical it is that you get it absolutely perfectly right. There's a license which you can acquire by making a planning application. Although it isn't officially called a planning application, it's exactly the same thing. But you need to hand in drawings, you need to hand in location plans, you need to tell them what you're going to do, ideally visualize it in some way. There's a line drawing. And then you can get a certificate which says that you're allowed to do this. No neighbor can object. That's the difference to a planning application. So you can just do it. And if you're happy to take the risk that somebody will complain about it, and you then have to fight it, then you don't even need that license. You can just go as a permitted development. There are small caveats. It's like you're not allowed to go 200 millimeters above the roof slope. You're not allowed to put the panels higher than the ridge. You're not allowed to put it on the wall facing the road in a conservation area. Walls are not very common as solar installations, but they do exist. So it's really, really open. There is very little restriction in that sense. Next one down is building control. It is not a stumbling block. You just need to check. And it depends on what installation you're choosing, whether, for example, you need to look at weight. So per square meter, a solar panel weighs about 18 kilos. The roof tiles you have on your roof, depending on what you have, are a multiple of that. Somewhere between, I think I have the numbers there. If you use plain clay tiles, it's 60 to 80 kilos per square meter. Even interlocking clay tiles, the more modern ones, are still 40 to 50, and slate tiles are 35 to 38 kilograms per square meter. So why is that interesting? It is interesting because there is one installation type which allows you to take the roof tiles off and put solar panels on instead of the roof tiles, because the solar panels have been certified to work as a roof covering and are completely accepted as a protected layer against weather and water. But you need to obviously look at water ingress. So if you do that, you need to have a system which is certified. There's an MCS standard accreditation, which allows you to make sure that the people who designed the scheme, the system, have designed it sufficiently well that it works as a weather barrier. If you don't replace the tiles and you put the solar panels just on top of the tiles, then the big factor is wind factor, wind lift. You can imagine they're like big kites. And if you don't tie them down nicely, they go off. And obviously that's not just a shame because you lose something valuable, but also a risk to everybody around you. So that becomes a really important element. And then obviously electric installation. It is an electric installation, and it's not the easiest. So it's important that you get a competent person who's qualified to do that. Often the same person who provides the panels does the installation, does the electrical connections, the certification for that, the notifications for building control. But sometimes it depends on who you contract. It can be individuals separate from each other. These people are lovely. They really got on my nerves. So if you have the average installation is somewhere between 3.6, 4.2, 4.5 kilowatt. As long as you stay under 3.68 kilowatt as a peak performance of the installation, you don't have to speak to UK Power Networks, who are the people in our area. But the distribution network operator has to give you permission if you go higher than that, if you're connected to the grid and you feed the energy you're generating back into the grid. If you make an installation where everything is on your site, you have batteries big enough to take the energy, or you use it up, no conversation needed. So that's something to keep in mind. And what to keep in mind is also the cost. We live 25 meters away from the high street, and to not dig the trench, but for us to pay someone to dig a trench, them just putting the cable in, securing it, connecting it up, connecting it to our entry point, £7,800. So we quickly found a way to spec the system that we didn't need that. Because, I mean, there are lots of details. If you have questions, come. I think right now that goes too far into the deep. Important element, you need to notify your insurance because it's a major alteration to your house. If you don't notify them, they can refuse if any damages occur. They can refuse to pay out. And don't forget your neighbors. Even if it's a permitted development, talk to your neighbors. I was surprised how open they were. I thought because it's old Amersham, people would be just like a bit more protective of the kind of conservation status, the list of buildings around us. But actually, people were really open and happy for this to happen. Some of the technical details. So this is a system, which is actually the one we have too. And what it does, it connects the solar panels on the roof through a DC cable, and that's a funny one because it's different to the cables which we normally have in the house because it's direct current rather than alternating current. It behaves slightly different, but just make sure that nobody can cut it. It's probably the most important part. You need an isolator, you need a controller. You can have a battery, and that battery, interestingly, because Amersham still has power cuts occasionally, you can use it as backup. So you can program the controller in such a way that if there is a power cut, it jumps in within a fraction of a second and provides power to your house until the battery is empty. Then you need an inverter to feed it into the house in order to make it into alternating current. And isolators, not so major as a point. And if you want to feed into the grid, you need a smart meter. Yes, go ahead. No, you stretch me there. As far as I know, they're all okay, because the only capacity they need to have is to register both directions to have the flow of electricity, which the old ones can't do. They would have to run backwards. So I refused. It was my choice to not get a smart meter because it's smart for the power companies. It's not necessarily smart for me. So I didn't want it. Now I regret it because we're on a long waiting list of getting a smart meter. So we're now generating electricity, and when our battery is full, we feed it into the system and don't get paid for it. So it's an important element. The controller is interesting because you need to manage the energy coming from the roof. You either feed it in, you either use it directly, or you put it into the battery, or you can charge your electric car, or you put it back into the grid. And all of those actions can be managed. What's missing there is the emergency backup. So all of that can be managed by this unit, and it seems to work rather well, but hard to say. The solar panel sizes, there are standards. It's somewhere probably around the 1.6 meters by almost a meter. But it's flexible, and it's as flexible as the manufacturer from whom you buy. These little cells are the defining element of in which increments you can change the size. But otherwise, everything's possible. You can theoretically also go in funny shapes. You can go in triangles. You can do whatever you want, but you pay a price for that. The standard sizes, the standard kind of proportions are easier to get hold of. And our supplier is someone who manufactures in the UK, therefore they have a lot of flexibility. And in order to make best use of our roof, we had to use a smaller one, the 260 watt unit, in order to fit 2 portrait arranged rows of solar panels onto the roof. You see the third one down, the 290, the 325 watt. That's the same unit. It's just simply more modern technology with higher efficiencies. Efficiencies on solar panels are something weird because they're all very happy that we now have efficiencies of somewhere between 18 and 22%. That sounds like awful, sounds absolutely awful to me. They have now done some latest technology and they think they might be able to push it to 30, 33, 35%, but that's about it for a while. There are still different panels around. Mostly nowadays it's monocrystallines, which is nice because they're also black and discrete. You can even lose all the white elements. That makes it completely plain. It almost looks like a skylight. There are the latest, not the latest, but there are the current technology, and they are more efficient than polycrystallines and thin film. It's a bit of a shame because I actually like the look of polycrystallines because it's that blue, that kind of very chemically looking bright blue with wonderful speckles in it, that's what you see up here. But the monocrystallines are a coherent material, and which creates the efficiencies which make it easier, better to use them. You can still get all of those. So you need, when you look at a supplier, you need to check with them what they're offering to you. You need to look at the efficiencies which they're offering. Yeah. So it takes, if you measure the amount of energy the sun delivers onto a square meter, the solar panel can only take 22% of that and create electricity from it. The rest goes unused. But it's not a bad technology, it's just the conversion factor which is there. Choosing a site. This is our house. The High Street one is somewhere here. And so what's important, it's the location, orientation to north. Ours is 65-degree southeast, which is not perfect. And then obviously the shape of the roof with the trapezoid shape, we had to look at how we can best make use of that. Interesting enough, I didn't even think about that, but we could have put solar panels on the other side too. Even less efficient, but it would be still creating energy. And if we wanted to do it, we could have done that. But I think at some point the money just simply ran out. This gives you an idea of the orientation of the roof. So on the top axis, you see west-southeast orientation. And then that's the tilt of the solar panels, meaning the tilt of the roof in most situations. And obviously, if you're at 30-degree, 20-degree, perfectly south, that's wonderful, and you get the most out of it. Our situation with 65, and our roof is steeper, it's 40 degrees. We're somewhere here, 84%. So of the energy which the solar panels can turn around from the sun, we only get 84% of that into our system. But I think for me, it was first like, is it really worth it? But then you look and you see people installing solar panels east-facing, west-facing. The only thing they don't do is north-facing. But literally every other orientation is out there. And I think the reason for it is simply you creating green energy. And yes, it might be more expensive than you would want it to be ideally, but it still creates green energy. And this is just a quick look at the seasonal performance, and no big surprise there. Interesting number is the the sun hours per day in average in the UK. Anybody guess how many hours? 5? 4.7. So again, it feels like really low. But even 4.7 hours on average makes us happy, so it's okay. So there are different panel types. And it has to do with budget. It has to do with the kind of roof you have. It's about the kind of look you want to have. And traditional panels are just simply those silver-framed trays with lovely blue or black infill. And you stick them on top on a metal frame. And it looks like an addition. It looks a bit sore. In roof panels, it's what we went for. It kind of, especially if you go with plain black ones, it kind of sits more within the structure. It makes it look a bit more wanted. PV slate is a really interesting one. So there, if you have a slate roof, and only then does it make sense, there are solar panels now which look fairly precisely like a slate roof. And yes, you can distinguish it, but there are even ways to completely get rid of it. As far as I know, it's not allowed if it's a listed building, but that's surely to come because you can barely tell the difference. I have some examples later. Infinity solar roof panels is interesting. It's when you cover an entire roof with solar panels, so edge to edge, meaning the solar panels become the roof. It's mostly in modern constructions, or if you put a roof over an existing array of buildings. They're semi-transparent panels, so you can have a carport with a glass roof, and the glass roof can have solar panels in it. So you have a semi-permeable light membrane there, and you can gain energy. Obviously, it means less density, which means less output per square meter, but it looks pretty amazing and works amazingly. Architecturally integrated and custom panels is kind of variations of that. So this is the kind of traditional element. Depending on how nicely they do it, you can see the frames on the side sticking out or not. This is the slate. And you see that you can still see the difference. And the solar panels are 3 slates next to each other. But it's a pretty impressive way of hiding it. And then you have the statements where the solar panels are the roof, where it really becomes a part of the building. And I love that, but you need a new building. So might be not the immediate idea. And then there are architectural statements, which I think, again, it becomes really, really interesting to use it. You see them set into those roof structures here, or these are the kind of the semi-transparent installations. It gives a lot of possibility, but it's a luxury to have when you look to build a new building and you design one and you have an architect to work with or somebody else. There's a huge amount of fun to be had to integrate them into the way the building looks, the way you think of the building as being your home. And this is just 3 examples out of Amersham of the different installations. So here you see the in-roof installation with slate. And then those 2 are traditional installations on a metal frame. There are quite a few in Amersham, but some of them are quite hidden. So manufacturers, roofers, installers, and electricians ideally do it with one person. I cannot emphasize it enough. It's a headache to run after the people because then they start blaming each other. You didn't show up, therefore I couldn't do my work, and therefore you have to pay me. Don't go there. Get one person, get them to do everything, and even then things go wrong, as I can certainly attest to. But you need all these people. So you need somebody who manufactures them or distributes them in the UK. Most of them are made in China. You need somebody who knows about roofs because you don't want them to poke a hole in the wrong place. So you really need to be confident that they can do this. The installers, Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully one of them is an electrician. Otherwise, trouble is brewing. I guess the conclusion is don't try to do it on the cheap. Either do it properly or just don't touch it. There's so much that can go wrong. Between your electrical system breaking down, your roof leaking, not quite sure that's much fun. This is the list from, I don't know who knows Ethical Consumer. Really interesting lists. They publish about the environmental and ethical credentials of people. And the people we went for, GB Sol, and I do not get paid by them, I promise. They are the only manufacturers in the UK. What I don't know, and I wasn't willing to get involved with this, whether they buy the little cells which I showed earlier. I assume they buy them from China. But at least the panels are manufactured in the UK. That gives them a lot of flexibility. It allows them to be responsive to any specific wishes you have. And they have a big plus on that. And they are the highest ranking in the environmental performance as well as the ethical performance because they don't manufacture in China. Comes with a premium, maybe. It was simply a decision for us that we decided given that there is the opportunity, we decided to go with someone who manufactures in the UK. Was it worth it? Don't know. Feels good. And then there are lots of others, some of the really big ones. Then all the big Japanese manufacturers, South Koreans, they all have their solution there. And some of them are still performing relatively well. So and I mean, most of these people don't install. You then need an installer who does it for you. And this was one who did one of the installations on the photo earlier in Amersham, in Old Amersham. And yeah, the first people I contacted, absolutely lovely people, nothing wrong with them, but they buy the units in from China. Sorry? They buy the units in from China. So that's the only reason why I didn't go with them. They were absolutely forthcoming, friendly, competent, as much as I can judge it. So that was, yeah. And then the GB Sol is the ones we went with because of their manufacturing situation. Sorry? I have later on some examples of the cost. So they are obviously relevant to us only. The average cost, I think, is assumed, and I think, Sam, you mentioned numbers earlier, somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 pound per kilowatt peak performance. So peak performance means that's the maximum the panel can do. Whether you have the perfect orientation or not, that changes the story completely. But so per kilowatt hour, so per 1,000 watt, you have to spend between 1,200 and 1,500 pounds if you go for a standard installation. And then to the top, there's no limit. You can do whatever you want. So looking at costs, there are no grants around anymore. They're all been stripped. There is no longer a feed-in tariff, which was fantastic because you got paid for generating electricity as well as feeding it into the system, exporting it into the grid. There is now the no VAT being charged on renewable energy installations. So that's a good thing. Not as good as it sounds because VAT 20% not paid sounds great, but it was only 6% paid. But we take 6%. There is the smart export guarantee, and that's great, except it's not guaranteed. The only thing that's guaranteed is that they have to pay you something. Depending on who you're a client, who is your supplier, it can vary from 1.5p to 7.5p. But I don't know who of you looks at their electricity bill. In 2021, it was somewhere like 19p. It's now up by 29 for 2022. So it's minuscule in comparison to what the feed-in tariff did. But it's money, so I'll take it. Once I have my smart meter. And these are just the two examples from the people who came and quoted. So this is a basic system with a traditional installation with the solar panels on metal frames. And the top number is 5%. Sorry, I was wrong. It's even less. So that's a standard installation, 5 kilowatt peak performance, so a bit bigger than a normal installation. And it's £6,000. So if we look at that, that's £1,200 per kilowatt. This one down here is more expensive because it has a battery in it. It has a 4.8 kilowatt hour battery in it. Now, in order to make that kind of, how much battery do you need in order to run your house? The average UK household has an electricity consumption of 8 kilowatt hours. A year? No, is it per day? Per day. Sorry, yes, I'm just thinking that. We are way beyond that. So I don't know whether that is because we heat the garden or something. We're still working on figuring out why we're paying so much. We're already thinking, because our house sits on a plot which previously was one, and now there are 4 houses on it. So the cables run everywhere, the supply lines. So we were thinking, we must pay for our neighbors because it was too much. So that becomes an interesting game once you start looking at solar panels to understand where your consumption sits, because suddenly it becomes a bit more precious because you're kind of generating it yourself. So that's a game we're still playing. So the battery is 4.8 kilowatt hours. That's half of your daily consumption. That'd be great if you use during the day, you use it directly, and then for the rest of the day, you can use it from the battery. But most of your consumption happens at night. It might need rethinking when you wash your clothes, when you do your dishes in the dishwasher. Those things, if you move them around, then there's a chance of moving your consumptions to daytime, and then it becomes interesting. So 4.8 kilowatt hours can work for a battery. We doubled that because of our situation, and we'll see. And this is the other supplier, and that is the in-roof installation, so removing tiles and putting the solar panels in instead of tiles. That becomes a bit more expensive, and you see that here in the system. That's the solar system for 6,000 plus the installation for 2.5. Sorry. Yes, 2.5. Electrics listed out separately. So it's a bit dearer. I think it's utterly worth it. But obviously, what's more important is to create green energy. This is the same quote, but with a battery. The battery, for some reason, is a lot more expensive than the other person's battery. Didn't go into it. And then this is another version of it with a bigger system, more panels, bigger battery, and the installation becoming more complicated. So you can spend money as much as you want, totally up to you. Sorry? This one? Oh, so 21,000. So £20,000, and it gives you something like, what is it, 6.5 kilowatt peak performance. So that's quite high. And an 8.2 kilowatt hour battery, which is also pretty high. Yes? Yes. Yes. So there's the inverter and the controller are often the same item nowadays. It's a hybrid. And it does all of the management itself and the inversion. So, yeah.
Basically, I know of a situation in Cambridgeshire where the council went out to energy suppliers
Mm-hmm.
They ended up with several thousand householders who got a very special deal
Yeah.
to have all this done.
Yep.
Okay. I've written to Martin Tett and our MP twice in the last 4 months.
Right.
I'm still waiting for answers as to why Buckinghamshire is not doing the same thing.
Interesting.
I'm just mentioning that because the more letters,
Okay.
the more contacts that they get, eventually the outcome will be a win-win. Because if we can get it, the chap who told me that he had it done, he was very, very happy with it.
Right.
£16,000 quote, £8,000 net cost through the council deal.
Nice.
Because of several thousand things. So I've got all the
Yeah.
details about who did it and whatever.
That'd be really interesting.
Send through to you.
Would you do that?
Unfortunately, I've got to go.
Yeah, that's fine.
There's
But
a trade
you have an email for Emerson, for Stones
Give it all
Emerson?
to your colleague.
Okay, good. Sorry, there is a.
Super. Thank you ever so much. And sorry for the
Thank you for the information, and maybe we can do something like that.
Thank you.
Bye. And now a quick look at what actually happened. So it was the day when the panels arrived. Very exciting. I know, a bit geeky, but it was really exciting. And that's what happened to our roof once you saw from the first picture, the house looked lovely. Didn't look so lovely anymore once they took all the roof tiles off. Then they put this frame on in which they mount the panels. You have the flashings to create the joint between the roof tiles which remain and the frame. And there are weather details at the top and on the sides so that water does not, well, unless there's a small problem or something else, but the water goes over the panels and never under the panels. There are mini rain gutters in here, which drain the water down and into onto the roof tiles. So it's a pretty solid system. They're not the only people doing this. There are others doing it plentiful. It's what I like about it is that you don't double up on a material. So you, instead of using the solar panels on top, in addition, you actually free up material. We can use it for the repairs on the other side of the roof, the remaining roof tiles. And from a weight point of view, it becomes really interesting. So you see all the detailing is really nicely done. It feels really solid. And that's halfway through. And there were a lot of roof tiles. Sadly, we had to throw away some of them, but when we redid the roof, then there was already some which were pretty dodgy, but we kept them. Sorry. Yes. In roof. Yes. Yeah. And it reduces the built up, so it's less visible. It's, yeah. Technically, no, because you still have a membrane. So as an ultimate installation, you need two protective layers, so the roof tiles and the membrane, but temporarily, you're totally fine with just the membrane. Once you figured out that your membrane's still good. But luckily, we redid our roof 10 years ago, so we knew that there can't be much wrong with it. The slate-looking solar panels, yes, they are a bit dearer, sadly. And then this is the kit you saw on the picture earlier in place. So that's the battery. You can put multiple of ones next to each other and interconnect them if you want to. You can grow a battery farm if you feel like it. You have the isolators, the main PC, the switches, and then that's the inverter and the management system. Interesting detail is that's a Wi-Fi receiver, so that you can control from your laptop the system at any time and also see what you're generating in energy and what you're using and where it goes. There's this lovely little diagram here, which is, I think, roof, battery, grid, and I think they already have electric vehicle in there as one of the routes where the electricity goes. And that's what it looks like now. Thank you very much. No, no chance. So the efficiencies, that's, I almost feel like not talking about it because it's so good. It's kind of frustrating, a frustrating number. But it is the best you're going to achieve for the next. Physics. Yeah. It's the material used, which is simply not capable of taking more of the heat energy, the warmth, the heat, the light, and turn it into electricity. There's simply a loss, which we haven't found a way of. At some point, somebody's going to invent a different material which gathers it. But every prediction is that it's not going to happen in the next 10, 20 years.
Maximum or minimum size they'll do it. If you want to set a strip along one section, that also works.
Totally fine. I mean, you can theoretically do one panel. But I mean, 2, 4, the other one I showed in Amersham, I think has 6 on one side of the roof and 6 on the other side of the roof. So water is an option. So theoretically, you can heat water directly with a solar thermal installation. So you have water circulating through the solar panels and go into a cylinder. You can use the electricity you generate here, not put it in a battery, but you can use it to heat the water cylinder and therefore store the energy like that. So interesting. If you have a cylinder, it probably makes sense to use it. A battery has a bad carbon emission footprint. So if you can avoid a battery, fantastic. I don't like storing hot water. For me, that doesn't make any sense. If you think of Legionnaire's disease, there is no point to have kind of water sitting there warm. But that's a personal answer. It's not a qualified technical answer.
Can I comment on that? Well, I need to say that it would be, Legionnaires shouldn't be a problem because it should be, the thermostat should set it so that you wouldn't have a Legionnaires.
But you can't heat with solar up to 65 constant. Same with heat pumps. They need additional.
If you're using electricity off the roof, you could, because it's effectively.
If you use, sorry, electricity, yes,
Yeah.
with circulation, not necessarily.
Yes.
Sorry.
I think you need to point out that you need to wash them occasionally, like you would the windows.
If you have that angle of installation, not very much. Yeah. Really? You could see that in the numbers. Interesting. Okay. Oh, wow. And what's, sorry, do you know the number of improvement? Was it like 20% more or 10 or?
I mean, we're on the old thing because we obviously use the electric that it's making,
Mm-hmm.
and then we get paid what gets fed back.
Okay. But yeah. 9, yes. So, sorry? The life expectancy is somewhere between 20 and 25 years if you get a quality product. I haven't heard it from anything else, so I don't know of a product which doesn't deliver that or promises it. As far as I know from the conversations I had, there's no maintenance required other than the occasional washing. With, yeah. But sorry.
Efficiency drops over time. It's like 1 cent a year. So they're coming after 25 years. They're perhaps worth 80%.
Yes.
So it's not as if they kind of get to a point and then suddenly.
Correct.
Yeah. So they probably last 50 years. So that's efficiency.
As we know a friend of ours has an installation 20 years ago, and he's just reaping in 80% of the performance. And yeah, I mean it's less, but it still gives you money. So why not?
So traditionally, in a 20-25-year lifetime of the panels, you would expect to have to replace the inverter, but I don't know if that's true. Did you get a guarantee on the inverter?
I have to look that up.
That was the standard thing. I don't know if there's been improvements, but so you might have to replace that bit of kit after 10 years.
Yeah, everything can break.
Sure.
We get a lot of phone calls from companies that want to come and service or upgrade or whatever. They did it and they know the problem, so they think, well, we'll come to help you next. But the company we had instead don't need that, really don't need it. So we're kind of halfway through our year's life story and the technology of the panels themselves changed too. So hopefully that will be better.
Okay. There's no wood. Please.
So I've got a couple of questions. So just simply speaking, how much of your electricity is it producing?
Do I really want to tell you how obnoxiously bad our electricity use is?
Well, no, but I mean, is it like 20% of what you use?
No, so we have a really horrendous situation. The house is yeah. So it only does a third of our electricity.
Right.
At top performance. No, you would expect an installation like this to deliver more like, if with the battery together, appropriately sized, I would expect it to deliver like up to 80% of your, well, around 80% of your electricity.
Do you run an electric car?
No, we don't.
But if you did,
yes.
How would that function in terms of using the battery?
Well, obviously it's additional usage. So you can use the car as a battery. So you don't have to have a storage battery. You can, if you don't use your car to an extreme that you always need the entire battery load, you can use the car battery to store the energy and draw the energy when the house needs it. So it's.
And then lastly, you've spoken about the financial cost of it. What's the embodied carbon and how long is it going to take to offset that with the production?
Yeah. So the assumption is that 4% of the carbon savings which you're generating with the panel are embodied carbon. So 96% of the energy you're generating is actual green energy, new, and not kind of already eaten up by the panels themselves being made. What I can't say is whether that includes inverters and battery. Obviously, it doesn't include a battery for sure, because that number will change. Yep. Geraldine.
If you have to decide at one time how big you want it, or can you get some installed and then have it enlarged later?
You can do that, but it's expensive.
It's cheaper to get it all done at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, if you know that you might want to grow it, it's a question of running the cables already, and that you can plug the next set in because they're can run separate loops. Yeah. I'd say it's possible, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it thinking of the cost. I mean, you saw in some of those numbers, there's actually substantial cost in the installation. And some of that is just simply, I mean, installation, £6,000. That's a chunk. And it's not all going to happen again, because you obviously have installed the system and you just need to connect additional. But you still need to go to the roof, you still need the scaffolding, you still need people. So, yeah, I'd say. We're running out of time. Yes. It depends on the age and type of your inverter, because it's not the inverter, it's the controller. Then I think the likelihood is that you need a new one. Yeah, because the three inverters run on separate circuits, and you would need to bring them together to. Yeah. I think it would be. I don't know the answer. That's probably the better answer. But from what I understand, because there was the question of 3-phase versus 1-phase in our house, you need a system that knows from the beginning that it can manage this. And the likelihood is high that at the time when the system was designed, the battery wasn't an option.
I'm afraid we're out of time, but I'm sure, are you running off?
I'm here. Yeah.
I'm not sure. We have the library books until 12. I don't know if they're going to throw us out. I'm just warning you.
They look rather militant. So, yeah.
How does the price that the grid pay you for any electricity you send to that, the unit price, compared with the unit price they charge you?
Terrible. So the best one at the moment is Octopus, and they pay you 7.5p per unit, but you pay 26. Yeah. So bad. It used to be 1-to-1 with the feed-in tariff. Almost. No? Or more. Yeah. Don't mention that. When it all goes smoothly? I mean, theoretically, it should take like, it can be 2 weeks if you do a metal frame installation. With the in-roof installation, it's going to take longer, I'd say 4 weeks. Ours started, the scaffolding came in the beginning of January, and the scaffolding came down this week. Please. They're in short supply. Actually, not that short, I think, because our supplier didn't mention any shortage of batteries, and we changed size of battery at some point, so it wasn't a problem. If you can live without a battery, perfect, because they're an environmental disaster. If you generate electricity and give it to the grid and don't get anything back really, then you're losing a lot of money. I mean, it's 20p per unit, which you're definitely losing. So keeping the energy locally is better. It is better to keep the energy locally because there are transmission and distribution losses in the grid. So if you use it where it is, you have another gain for the environment. The batteries have a shorter lifespan than the rest of the system. So it's, for us, it was a clear decision of wanting to have the energy there, not having to deal with the grid. And because we have such large consumption, what we generate during the day, we will never use. So we will always have a huge amount of energy, which will go somewhere else and feed somebody else, not us. Yes. Efficiency of? Okay. That's a good reference frame. I like that. Yes. No, it's a porch. Yeah, it's like it's a roofed area, but it's open. You can put them in a loft. but the inverter creates heat. The inverter creates heat, and it needs ventilation. So if you put it in the loft and you heat your loft in the winter, that's nice. In the summer, you wouldn't want it. Yes, it should not be exposed to rain. I think they're IP65, but leaving them in the rain straight would not be the right idea. And they need a cementitious panel in the back for heat protection to the wall. And so it's, yeah, but you can put them in a cupboard. So the idea is to put a cupboard around it, but you just have to have large ventilation openings. But you can hide them. Sorry. Sorry, I couldn't hear that. Interesting question. Not necessarily, because people are still on the fence whether they want them or not. So as far as I understand from estate agents, it is not necessarily seen as a win. Yes. Yes. If you get somebody to come out and to look at it and have all the papers ready for them, otherwise they don't accept it. Yep. Nope. All good?
One more
yes.
question.
I think there's a video online.
We'll work on putting the video online on our website. We'll have a video. We'll see if we can have the power as well. And then we'll have all the information that we have exchanged.
The website address is on the piece of paper here.
If you just got a little leaflet that one of my colleagues gave you with the next stop, then you should have that.
I'm happy to share the presentation. And if you need certain links, I mean, the Energy Saving Trust is a fantastic source. Very good information, plenty of calculators. So they're really interesting source. Yes.
So if you could, we have a table just outside of the library, and in there we have leaflets for our next stop, which is coming in June on energy saving. And in there you have our website. In our website is very easy to find this stuff, and we'll have all the material there. And also we have a membership form, because we are definitely looking for members, whether you want to actively participate or just give us your voice. So everything should be outside.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.